actually formed this larger skirmish line,
really,
but I believe there are many more where that came from. Why is that important? Well, if they don't come through those doors, it's good that they've been able to get through that building, because where else would they come from? They would have to get through the mass of people on either side of the encampment. You have about 1,000 people on each side of the encampment, on the east side and the west side. Maybe a little bit less than 1,000 on the west side, at least 1,000 on the east side. But it's a sizable crowd that would be difficult for a large group of officers to penetrate. And so it seems like they've made entry into these other auxiliary buildings here.
What do you see coming out of these demonstrations?
Into the quad. They have also used some of these buildings as a lookout spot. People have pointed out that there are sharpshooters in place. Now, there are sharpshooters. Are they here to shoot anybody? No. I mean, they're looking for threats, but probably more than anything else, they are observing with their scopes and assisting in the recon for the watch commanders on the ground as this moves forward through the night. But there are indeed officers in a variety of positions, obviously positions that we would never give away from up here, but I can tell you that they are all over the place, keeping a close eye on things in the middle of the encampment and on the edges with a lot of technology at their disposal. It is an elaborate effort, and I think it is indicative of something about to happen as we continue to see this, these skirmish lines grow here.
And as the LAPD and other agencies prepare their whatever tactics they're going to use, one would assume they are keeping in mind the symbolism of the tactics that they employ.
But what I meant by what
they have all sorts of things that are at their disposal. You mentioned a Bearcat that is available here.
Brown became the first U.S. university to consider divesting from Israel. The pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel protesters, they agreed to clear their encampments on campus after coming to an agreement with the university administration. They said they would put
these are students,
a vote regarding the issue of divestment from
they are at the moment
Israel,
not being violent, not being threatening in any fashion.
In October, but however, something happened, something tangible happened
this encampment to be so
out of that demonstration,
and
I think what people
for lack of a better term,
would be
violent,
hoping for the most is a chain reaction or a butterfly effect, if you may, of seeing this type of heeding to the calls of the demonstrators, heeding to the demands of the demonstrators happening on a larger scale.
So
maybe
it's going to be, we'll have to see whether it is a measured response. Remember, we have an interim chief. We don't have a permanent chief. It's Chief Choi. He was appointed just recently by Mayor Bass, and we are still awaiting word on who the permanent chief of the LA Police Department will be. This interim chief has quite a job to determine how his officers will respond to this and in what way and what tactics to employ, keeping in mind that these are college students for the most part and that they're not being violent. You have to use a proportionate amount of force to disperse this. If
I think that's right.
No force at all. We'll see what ends up happening, because that will depend in large part on how the students respond, how the people who are demonstrating and who are part of this encampment respond if and when police move in.
Many managements, remember,
it's such a great point, Mark. It's the optics that are almost like, it's almost like the optics here are the elephant in the room. It is the priority for everybody here to make this look as tame as possible and as under control as possible and as methodical as possible without overusing the force or sending the wrong message when this goes worldwide tomorrow, which it certainly will. This is a major international story here, or domestic story at least, that is going to be seen all over the world. I know there were TV stations in Israel last night that were streaming our coverage last night during the protest. It is that big of a deal, and it is probably the optics and the fear of certain optics, which have actually brought us to this point in the first place. Nobody wants it to, everybody wants to allow this group of students, and obviously it's more than just students here, we know that, but everybody wants to allow for everybody to exercise their First Amendment right. It's such a crucial part of our democracy, and nowhere less than on a college campus.
Is that they don't want their taxpayer dollars
to violence
to keep going to the Israeli
like
regime who is killing children with that military aid.
And you
people are just not happy with all the taxpayer dollars that continues to fund and fuel this murderous regime, as you mentioned, thousands of miles, hundreds of thousands of miles away. And then what happened just last week was the approval of that military aid, in spite of all the global demonstrations against U.S. support for the Israelis. The U.S. went ahead and passed another massive military aid assistance for the Israelis, where billions of dollars will continue to go to the Israelis, who are using it, at least over the past 7 months, to kill women and children, innocent women and children, let alone what has been taking place for the past 7 decades or so.
To disperse this crowd and to eliminate
that's right. And you've touched on a wider
available resources to do it. Will the group participate and cooperate and go peacefully? Will they start to recede and go home? Will the crowds thin out as the night goes on? And maybe that's when they take the opportunity to start, giving people the opportunity to leave on their own accord. And to what extent will they face resistance? These are all open-ended questions, but the optics are what are driving a lot of the decisions. Paramount is the safety of the officers, as well as the safety of the protesters themselves. But the optics are the elephant in the room that are on everybody's mind.
Ridiculous provocation of China
on our mind as well as we cover this, and as we really just watch it all unfold along with everybody else and try to provide whatever context we can based on what we know of both the history of campus protests, and in particular on this campus. There was a time during the 60s, of course, when the campuses around the country were erupting in protests and demonstrations and sit-ins and things similar to what we're seeing now for years on end during the Vietnam War, beginning in the mid-60s and continuing into the early 70s. UCLA, no stranger to that. There's a free speech area, as I mentioned, that's near it's kind of on the western edge, just past the western edge of this encampment. It's an area called the Jantz Steps, or the Jantz green space, I guess you'd call it, where that was kind of the free speech area during the free speech movement of the late 60s. And people gathered there. There were concerts there. Different speakers came.
Mr. Anderson, one more issue which really comes to mind, and it's definitely
of discourse,
political, very prevalent with regards to Western, specifically with the United States mainstream media, is how will this all play in to the elections in an election year right now? Because everything in America seems to fall down right now to come down to an issue of the right is this and the left is that. How will this issue seep in and ooze in to the issue of elections in this pivotal election year in the United States?
Have been targeted by people either in these encampments or people who are part of these demonstrations and not being allowed to move about the campus freely.
It's a game where they replace
one of the issues that may have led to the confrontation that took place last night, in which pro-Israel supporters
if anything could be worse. But I think it's pretty clear that the Biden administration is going to be punished
into the encampment and trying to tear it down themselves, resulting in a lot of violence and a really explosive situation last night. This is a conflict, as we have said, that has gone on for centuries.
These demonstrations are going to be
and historians have always, had to grapple with the high emotions and the tensions that are in the region and that have boiled over around the world as people with the sympathies that lie on either side of this issue confront each other on places like this, on college campuses and elsewhere. And so we're seeing the result of that here. And what is going to be happening here, we expect, is an effort to bring the tension down and remove the focal point that has led to an increase in tension.
That has been so badly
led
damaged
to greater tensions
that it will induce some sort of shame. You can already see
right
it
on
with
social
the Biden
media. You've kind of been following this too, right, Chris? In terms of social media, you see people kind of different sides trolling each other. In effect,
on the other hand, they admit from time to time that
it's so true. It's something that I've never seen before, even as recently as a few years ago during George Floyd. It was happening, but maybe to a different extent because of the rapid growth of live streaming, where TikTok has really changed the nature of the demonstration on both sides, and it's been used and exploited by both sides, and some would argue even the platforms themselves to be complicit, but that's a whole other story for another day.
Maybe there's some
the platforms are being used as a communication tool, even within the protest. Even here in a local protest, and probably at the various universities across the country, where you have people talking to each other and threatening each other via social media.
Right, thanks a lot, Director. Center for Counter-Economic Studies, Mr. Tim Anderson,
on
speaking to us
on hate crime in some
Thank you
cases.
for sharing your thoughts with us here on
It's a new world
For those of you who
where
are just
the
joining
threats
us,
come from different places, and so does the dialogue. And somewhere in the middle
live
is,
anti-Israeli and
there's certainly
pro-Palestinian demonstrations
parts of the internet where you can have entirely productive conversation between two opposing sides. There's no doubt about it. But that same technology is being used in a variety, a spectrum of ways that can contribute to
UCLA,
real life, tangible
Los Angeles, California.
Activism. But
that
activism,
issued
again,
an order for
in many
the
cases,
demonstrators to
can start off as
disperse
a
or
free speech,
face arrest. However,
First Amendment
hundreds have remained
privilege, and turn into something much
remained
darker,
intact,
or more violent, or
refusing to leave
restrictive, or
their
dangerous.
encampment, putting on helmets, masks, and goggles, maybe preparing
rhetoric
themselves for
gets
the
people
inevitable.
Hurt, and that's why you got to bring an end to it. That's what they would argue, is that it's
protesters
time.
have been waving the
the
Palestinian
size of
flag,
this encampment
chanting
its
pro-Palestinian,
limits, at least the limits that
anti-Israeli
our politicians
slogans.
are comfortable with. We have seen these same types of protests
Similar events were also taking place
a dozen different
in
ways
college campuses
in the
across
last
the country,
week, and a dozen different places across the country, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, and depending on what university campus you're talking about.
In
It's
heavy
a very
riot gear
different,
amassing
it's a very
around
different
the
vibe
demonstration
in New York
there
versus Florida
at the UCLA
versus Georgia
campus
versus Texas
in Los
versus
Angeles.
UCLA. It is,
More than 1,500 protesters
part of
have
what
been
makes
arrested at colleges
our 50
across the
state
U.S.
union unique.
And in one of the latest incidents, 20 protesters were arrested at University
real time tonight.
of Dallas. Police have
so
been accused
far
of using
we have
brute
seen
force
the build-up to that. We have not
against
seen any
demonstrators.
overt action taken by police. Last night it was a question of when are they going to show up. Tonight it's a question of, well, they've shown up.
These
What's going
protests,
to
of course,
happen?
ignited
What are they going to do?
at Columbia
I think that's
University
kind of where
on
we
April
all
the 18th,
are right now, is watching
and
all
have
of
since
this
spread
unfold.
nationwide.
Is
The
Leanne
protesting
Suter
students
still
demand
out there?
university authorities divest from companies that
We
have
are, Mark. We are just
nexus
keeping an
with
eye on
the
the crowd from
military.
the outer
Brown
edge
University,
here
one of the universities that
of the
heeded the
protest.
calls of the demonstrators,
And what's the vibe from your perspective at the moment?
has agreed to do so.
Yeah, not much has changed from our vantage point. We happen to just see the same group of CHP officers walk in a short time ago. They all just headed back out and left this area and moved to some other location, apparently. We haven't seen much change from this vantage point of the protest at all, actually. We're, as I say, just seeing a trickle of people leaving the area here, but the large majority of the crowd continues to stand around and waiting to see what's going to happen next, and waiting to see what the police or what law enforcement may end up doing. It really is just kind of a waiting game at this point for the crowd. I'm surprised so many are staying this long. I understand that many of them decided they're going to be out here for the night.
Intifada means uprising, and it is the legitimate
point.
Right, enshrined in
Imagine
international
if
law of the
you're a
Palestinians.
student at UCLA who's in a dorm or in an apartment near campus with this drone of helicopters overhead,
an occupation,
loudspeaker announcements, people chanting, cheering, yelling,
they have
drumming,
the right to
making
self-defense. They have a
noise
right
and music, and you're just trying to study for your midterms.
Bear arms against
I
this
imagine this has been
occupation.
disturbing now for a second night in a row, really, of this sort of
However, as
blanket
seen in
coverage.
many
It's got to be
instances in
hard
the
for
past,
them. Chris Christie, I wanted to
try to put a twist on that.
I wanted to see if you have seen whether or not
play into
the CHP helicopter is on station, because they're the lead agency. They have their own helicopters here.
I was hesitant to mention it because I know that they were making their way in this area. They were in Van Nuys. They had set down for fuel.
But guess what?
Have now arrived on
Global
scene.
demonstrations.
They are not talking. They are not
student
giving anything away here.
in the United States.
I can only presume that the arrival of that CHP helicopter
that narrative
may be indicative of something.
false narrative
We were expecting that as
has
part
failed
of
across
the
the board.
prelude to whatever's going to take place here, and it appears that yet another indication that we're getting closer to some sort of police action here, as the arrival of that CHP helicopter is now very obvious to us as he flies through our shot, very probably obvious to the folks down there on the ground who are monitoring the air traffic above them. But I think that, along with the large law enforcement presence here and the large contingent of CHP officers that we are still looking for and anticipate seeing a lot more flashing lights coming from some direction. I don't know where. Look at that, Santa Monica police out here. So there are even other local jurisdictions besides LAPD. But we are looking for California Highway Patrol. We're expecting hundreds of them. That is what we were told, and I expect that at some point we'll see them make their way into the area. Here you see LA City Fire standing by in case they are needed. But you're right, the California Highway Patrol helicopter now doing tight orbits around this campus, looking closely at the encampment, and it looks like there's some kind of signaling going on with those flashlights. I don't know what's happening down there, but all of a sudden you see more strobe lights in the middle of that encampment. But whatever's going to happen may be closer to happening, Mark. That helicopter has about the same fuel capacity as our helicopter, which is just over a couple hours. So they're here, and we'll see what happens next.
All right. Well, as we watch this, again, for people just tuning in, the area of interest is Dixon Plaza, which is this area, this green space that is between the iconic Royce Hall of UCLA and the Powell Library. Royce Hall to the north, Powell Library to the south. To the west is the Shapiro Fountain, just to the west of the encampment. That area now fortified around the outside of the fountain, between the fountain and the Jantz Steps. That area now fortified with plywood that wasn't there last night. And on the east side, of course, is the area that was the focus of so much activity and, in fact, violence last night, is the area just on the east between those two buildings, Royce Hall and Powell Library. Just to the east is the eastern edge of it, just between Royce Hall and Haynes Hall, and between Powell Library and Kaplan Hall. And you see the skirmish line with 2 lines of highway patrol officers and 2 lines of at least one involving LAPD, and perhaps both being LAPD officers in blue uniforms. 4 skirmish lines at my last count that are in that area between the eastern edge of the encampment and the university flagpole. So that's kind of that'll give you a sense of what we're talking about. And down within that area is, of course, this encampment that's been the focus of so much attention. And last night was the focus of violence by outside demonstrators who were trying to tear it down. And so now the focus is going to be on what's going to happen in terms of the law enforcement response. We have been told, it's been hinted and even overtly stated that something is very, very likely to happen tonight with regard to the future of that encampment. And what we're looking at here to the right is the staging area. This is the federal building on Wilshire Boulevard, and a huge show of force, or a huge contingent of law enforcement vehicles there. Those officers being brought on station. The buses you see off to the top are LA County Sheriff's Department buses, many of them. Those normally during the day are used to transport prisoners from jail to court and back. Tonight, they've been brought here perhaps in anticipation of transporting people who have been arrested, transporting them to be booked. But again, all indications are this show of force is not for nothing. There's a purpose to this, there's a reason for this, and we're going to find out the reason fairly shortly. Chris Christie?
Yeah, Mark, I'm wondering if we still have contact with either of our ground crews. Being told that the helicopter has or may be about to make a dispersal order PA announcement from the helicopter. I'm just curious. Obviously, we wouldn't hear that from Air 7, but I am curious if that has happened. That may be, again, more indication that the final steps are being taken to disperse peacefully here. But I am being told that the helicopter may be about to, if they haven't already, make an announcement. I'm not sure if we're in touch with Leanne or Shayla.
Well, apparently Leanne, we're told, has not heard any sort of dispersal order from her vantage point, and Shayla is not available at the moment, so we don't think that she has heard anything either. But we will check back with them as needed. That is kind of the final step, isn't it, before police move in? They make a final order saying you've got a certain amount of time to leave. Please leave now, and if you don't, you are subject to arrest.
Yeah, it certainly is, Mark. As we kind of scan the campus, we're just basically looking for any sign of law enforcement vehicles that may have gotten closer to the area we're talking about here. It does appear that those skirmish lines are holding strong. They have definitely grown over the last hour, but they are holding strong, and it does appear that we're getting closer to something. It just seems like, well, who knows where these officers are ultimately going to be coming from. It's just really anybody's guess. We know I can expect at least a group coming from those other two halls on this side of the encampment. But from all indications that we've gotten, we expect a whole lot more California Highway Patrol officers where these gentlemen have came from, and we just don't see them yet. Difficult to see. Is probably a good reason why they decided to do this at night or in the overnight hours, but the darkness definitely helps them.
Right. I'm getting an email from our assignment desk. Apparently, let's see here. Something involving pizzas being delivered not too long ago, and those pizzas being delivered to the police officers that are in, and it's one of the halls that's flanking it. It's either Haynes Hall or Kaplan Hall. That food was being brought in to them. So perhaps, depending on when that happened, maybe it was about 12:30 was when it was filed on X. So based on that, maybe they're not moving anytime soon, because if they're going to be eating first, maybe that's not the plan. We'll have to find out.
Yeah, I mentioned the strobes earlier. One thing that we are also seeing, speaking of strobes, Rob, if you tilt down just a little bit towards the skirmish line, there has been a consistent strobe coming from that tent right there for the last couple of hours. And essentially, they've been taking turns between pointing those flashlights in our direction, which I must admit it sometimes is slightly blinding, but they're also pointing it directly at the eyes of those CHP officers in those skirmish lines. They've been doing it for the better part of the last couple of hours, a clear intent to taunt those officers. It's been going on for a while. It's annoying, and they know it's annoying, and they're doing it on purpose, obviously, with full intention of again, taunting those officers. But that strobe is continuing at least for the better part of the last 2 hours.
All right, that is worth noting. That is one of the things you talked about. Not, anything can be weaponized and anything can be used as an act of resistance. And if they are using strobe lights to affect the night vision of the officers out there, that is one thing that they may have decided to employ. You're seeing some movement here among people in the encampment. There's been some milling about pretty much all evening, but some folks with the helmets that are pretty much ubiquitous now among people who are within the encampment. Bike helmets, hard hats, things like that. A lot of folks wearing those, especially the people kind of at the front right there by the barricade. They seem to all have helmets on. So you're right, they are bracing for something. What's interesting too, you've got the kind of the security guys, the folks with the yellow jackets, you know who I'm talking about, that are kind of right there on the barricade. So they're there. They're looking pretty casual. They don't look as if something is about to happen. They're just kind of, I don't get a sense from the body language that I'm seeing from them that they anticipate something is imminent. I don't imagine that once things start to happen that the police are going to want to have them in between police and the demonstrators. So maybe that's something we look to as an indicator perhaps that things are getting close. If they are suddenly gone or are ushered away, maybe that would be a clue as to whether something is imminent.
I'm being told, Mark, that apparently Shayla is reporting that indeed they have now given an additional dispersal order via the loudspeaker down there. It's been happening occasionally throughout the night, so it's been ongoing since about 6:15, as you mentioned. But another dispersal order was just indeed given just a few seconds ago. So just kind of reading the tea leaves here, we are seeing more activity, and now yet another dispersal order as the clock ticks on here, and that CHP helicopter continues those orbits. You mentioned that group that was walking along the right side of the encampment there down that walkway. They were all wearing helmets, and they've all kind of filtered their way through the front of the line. They're basically hanging right behind the wall and right behind the first row of tents. You could see them. A lot of white helmets and yellow helmets. Almost everybody on that front, I would say the front 10 feet behind that wall is wearing a helmet.
Interesting. All right. Well, it does appear that at least on that side of the barricade, people are getting ready. They don't know when the effort might come to dislodge them, but they are preparing for what appears to be that eventuality. They've got helmets. They're using the strobes. Again, I see them aiming right at you with that light. They're using the strobes to try to disrupt the night vision of the officers. You got the CHP helicopter there that is making, as you said, tight orbits over the scene. A huge police presence in and near UCLA, along with LA City Fire, in anticipation, we suppose, of any sort of medical emergencies that might take place. And so now everybody is just kind of waiting and watching to see what might happen.
Yeah, I'm actually watching that police helicopter. That California Highway Patrol helicopter almost looks as if he might be departing the area. I'm just trying to scope it out. Maybe he's actually just making a very wide orbit, actually. It looked like he was moving away. He's all the way over the 405 almost now, but still basically in an orbit pattern around the campus. So I'm not sure, what that's about, or if he's going anywhere, but just kind of reading the tea leaves here, just looking for any indication or any activity whatsoever, because for the most part, it's been static otherwise, other than the occasional movement of groups of protesters or groups of officers in one direction or the other. it's almost taken on more of a standoff here with those guys behind the wall. But other than that, it's been pretty static here.
All right, Shayla Girardin, who we thought had left but apparently hasn't, indicated to our assignment desk that she heard the dispersal order that was just made. I don't know if Shayla, you can hear me. Are you available to speak? We don't have her. All right, because I'd love to have more detail about the contents of that dispersal order, whether there was a time limit given, whether there was an indication that anybody there is subject to immediate arrest. Or anything like that. I'd like to find that out if possible. I don't know if somebody from our assignment desk can reach Shayla and/or her crew, or if somebody else who's involved in this can let us know about that, because we'd like to pass that along to our viewers. If a dispersal order was given, was there a time limit, and what would that time limit be? There's a drone. There's a drone right there.
Yeah, we've seen a handful of drones being used, presumably by law enforcement, but I can't confirm that. It's entirely possible that somebody in the group is controlling a drone. It's impossible for us to tell, but it certainly is possible to be coming from either law enforcement or the protesters. I've actually seen chatter about that online as well. So I can't rule out that there are individuals in that encampment with drones. It's information that I can't confirm, but has been conveyed to me, if you will, by some folks on social media. So you can see that group of CHP officers. By the way, both the officers in this shot here and the LAPD officers behind them, they've been standing there for some time now, and I don't even recall the last time we've seen them get swapped out. But essentially, the skirmish lines, to some extent or another, they've grown in the last hour, but the minimal skirmish line has been in place for about the last 5 hours, and I can't imagine what it's like for these officers to be standing there for so long. I mean, this is really dragging on. I'm sure at some point when we weren't looking that they are swapping these officers out. It would be, highly unusual if they didn't. But this skirmish line has been in existence in some form or fashion for hours now.
Yeah, and you're right, to just stand there, it's, in many respects, it's harder to stand for 3 hours than it is to walk for 3 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's tough duty. It's not easy, and crowd control is a very difficult thing. There's a lot of emotions involved. The officers have to keep their emotions in check, yet they have to deal with people who may be deliberately taunting them, maybe deliberately trying to provoke them into some sort of action that they can then use against them, and also go about doing their job, which is to remove the people that are supposed to be removed. There's that CHP helicopter again. As we have been reporting, an additional dispersal order has been given just in the last few minutes. The first one, the declaration of an unlawful assembly, was given at 6:15 last night, and this is an additional order that has just been given, which is an indicator that perhaps the time is getting short before some sort of action is taken.
Yeah, still looking for any kind of movement. My eyes are peeled. All of ours are. We're looking within that encampment and around the campus for any sign of movement, and we're just not quite seeing it just yet. It seems like even the activity within the encampment has simmered down a little bit. Let's go ahead and push in a little bit, Rob, and see if looks like people are still walking around. I mean, the food line has shortened, I think, slightly, but folks are kind of concentrated in the middle, especially the ones without helmets. But I mean, even the ones in the middle, there are a fair amount of helmets throughout the crowd here. But everybody's just kind of standing around, milling around aimlessly, sort of. And I mean, it's organized, but I mean, they seem to be losing their patience a little bit too. They're just kind of, hanging out on a Wednesday night.
Yep, it could be a very momentous Wednesday night for everyone involved in this. Hopefully it ends peacefully. Hopefully whatever happens